All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'm sure people will be continuing to join for a few minutes here, but let's go ahead and begin the presentation. So I'm Jelena. Welcome. I teach with LSATMax. I took the LSAT in June of 2017 and was lucky enough to score 178, or really prepared enough, rather, because how you prepare, of course, says a great deal about how you will do on the test. But preparing for the LSAT is not what we're here to talk about today. Today, we are here to talk about why you should prepare carefully for the LSAT and what impact it has on your financial future. All right, so I still see some people joining, but let's go ahead and talk about money. Not everyone's favorite topic, but a very, very important one when you are getting ready for law school. Thank you. I'm having fun with making my hair much brighter the longer that quarantine lasts. It is how I am dealing with this bizarre year. Just the longer that quarantine goes on, the more colors go in my hair. Uh, Yes. So if you are looking at a legal career, money is important because the schooling is expensive. And the LSAT has a pretty shockingly big impact on that. So I did all of this research because our CEO was like, hey, can you look into what the latest numbers are on how the LSAT affects starting salaries? I was like, oh, yeah, sure. And I've seen there are some studies on it. I've seen some studies on it before, so I knew it was a dramatic impact. But when I really started looking into it for this presentation, and we also have like a full length white paper that I believe you can still find the download for on our sponsored post on Above the Law. Maybe we have a link for that somewhere. But you're going to get all the information today. Anyway, when I actually started researching it, I was pretty shocked to see that it is this big of an impact. And that's kind of not great. Like, I'm not saying that it is good that the LSAT has a huge impact on your financial future. It is a pretty good test. I like it. I like teaching it. But like, one test really should not mean that much about how much money you make in your career as a lawyer. But it does. So if you're considering a legal career, you need to know that. So there are two ways this happens. One is that a high LSAT score makes you eligible for merit scholarships. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how merit scholarships work later. They are more relevant to you if you are going to more like a state school versus like a top 14 law school. Many of the top 14 don't give a lot of merit scholarships because everybody who gets into a top 14 has a lot of merit. But very, very big thing at the rest of the law schools out there. And number two, probably the most important part, is a high LSAT score is how you get into the schools that the high paying employers hire from. So let's talk a little bit more about that. So not every school has access to the top employers in the legal field. If you're not going to a top law school, and now a lot of people talk about the top 14, but really, 15 versus 14 doesn't matter that much, but like 30 versus 14 matters a lot. There are only a handful of law schools that big law employers hire from. So let's talk about what big law is and what the actual salary potential in the legal field is. Basically, there are two kinds of legal job: public sector and private sector. So public sector, we're talking about like being an assistant district attorney, a public defender, or working for a nonprofit that does public service. So that's your Greenpeace, that's your ACLU, that's your workers' rights organizations, that's your path of like getting a fellowship and going off and doing your own like legal advocacy work for wrongfully incarcerated people. That is all the public service stuff. And there is no way to make a lot of money in the public sector. It just isn't a thing. If you're in that field for many years, you may eventually make decent money, but starting salary is going to be typically between $35,000 and $65,000, depending on the cost of living in the location and whether you're working for a nonprofit or working for a government employer. So these jobs may pay a lot less than the private sector, but that doesn't mean that they're any less competitive. So if you want a top public sector job, say you want to go work for the ACLU and be a litigator and be like one of the people who gets to be like, we're suing the president. If you want to do that, you still need to go to a top law school. Now, there is also like, there's a little bit of a balancing act there where some public sector employers like they may not necessarily want like the top of the class person at Harvard as much. So you may actually have to overcome like a little bit of stigma if you're too successful as a law student, just because they're not trying to bring someone into an entry-level $35,000 a year position who's completely stuck up and thinks they're better than the 20-year attorneys. But they still have a lot of applicants for these public sector jobs, and you need to be at a great law school and also in a great position in your class to have a shot at the most exciting of them, the ones where you get to do really impactful work, because there are just not that many of those jobs. There's lots of jobs, but there's not that many of the really, really satisfying legal jobs, and there are a lot of people who want them. So your LSAT score is still the thing that's going to get you into the schools that give you a shot at those jobs. Now, let's talk about the private sector, which is where the money really comes in. So if you are somebody who is maybe expecting to finance law school primarily via taking on debt, you're going to have to make money coming out of law school, unless you can like get some loan forgiveness, but there's very little certainty about the future of even public service loan forgiveness programs for law school. So if you're going to be taking on 6 figures of debt to go to law school, you're probably looking at trying to get a high-paying job when you come out. Top big law firms may pay over $200,000 a year. So big law firms are like, that's like your Jones Day that has been in the news a lot for like being a part of the election lawsuits right now. And the Lincoln Project is running ads shaming them for it, big controversy. But if you're going to work at that kind of law firm where they have clients like, say, the president or Pepsi or British Petroleum, those giant corporate clients, and they have like 500 plus lawyers, and they hire all of the best law grads that they can. They compete to hire the top law grads. They may pay you in your first year as much as $210,000, $220,000. You are on potentially a partner track there, like 6 or 7 years. If you're doing well, you're going to get promoted onto the partner track, and if you're not doing so well, they will show you the door. But those are the super, super lucrative jobs. Now, the thing that there isn't, even when you see like average legal salaries, like you might see something like that, that's like the average salary of a new lawyer is $100,000 a year. That is not because there are actually law jobs that pay $100,000 a year. There are a few, it's not common. It's more like there's 2 legal salaries. There's like $60,000 to $70,000. And there's like 170 to 210. There's not really a middle. There's like, I know of like one private public service firm in San Francisco that pays $100,000 to first year lawyers, but that's like private public services. They do like big class actions like the Women of Walmart lawsuit. But for the most part, you're going to be making either around $70,000, maybe a little less, or around $200,000, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, not in between. So if you are looking to make as much money as possible as a young lawyer, you want to be at one of the big law firms that might pay you $200,000 a year, and they only hire from a very few law schools. And you can figure out which ones those are by looking at the schools that have a high median starting salary for their graduates. So the American Bar Association forces law schools to publicize a certain number of statistics for their graduating classes. Things like bar passage, things like employment rate of employment in a job that requires bar passage. So like if they just said employed, then that would count like, oh, I'm employed at Nordstrom's as a floor manager. But if they say employed in a job that requires bar passage, then you actually have to be working as a lawyer. So that tells you a little bit more about the value of a degree there. So one of those things that the ABA requires law schools to disclose about last year's graduates, like a year later. So a lot of this is based on 2018 stuff, because we're not a year out from, or when these last numbers were published, they were not a year out from their 2019 graduates graduating. But they have to say, okay, what is the salary of your students who are now employed at law firms? So there are 23 schools where the median starting salary, so remember that's the one if you lined up, remember a number line, if you are like me and not a natural math brain, remember the number line where you mark the middle number in all of the numbers that you're giving, not the average. The median starting salary is $180,000 a year, 23 schools. And the median LSAT score, which is also reported in ABA required disclosures, is 167.65 for all those schools. In other words, they are all only admitting at the median point, the 50th percentile, the top 5% of test takers. So you basically have to be 95th percentile or above on the LSAT to have a decent chance of getting into one of those 23 schools. So when we look at the other schools, the schools that are not up there at that $180,000 median, we can see that the LSAT median slips quickly. For a $100,000 median starting salary, you've got a 158.63 LSAT median averaged across 8 schools. When we go down to $70,000, so these are schools that are probably sending most of their graduates to those kind of smaller tier law firms that pay $65,000 to $70,000 for new lawyers. That median is 155, and we're averaging out 16 schools. And note that all of these numbers are actually about private sector jobs only, because like I said, no matter how great your LSAT score, how great your resume, nonprofits only have as much money to pay you as they have to pay you. Not really a lucrative space to be in. You do it for the public service, so those salary numbers can't really be mingled with the private sector because they're not based on the same factors. And then there's actually 7 schools that have the lowest private sector starting salary of $50,000. So they're like not even really sending their students to second tier employers that pay $60,000 to $70,000. They are sending their students to lower tier employers, or their students may have to like start a legal practice of their own, which is very tough when you're first out of law school and don't make very much money their first year. And the median LSAT score there is 150. Now, 150 is actually slightly below the median of LSAT scores. It was for a while intended to kind of be the median, like the 50th percentile LSAT score is 150 was an easy thing to remember. But over the years, it's turned into the median is actually about 153. So that's usually the 50th percentile of LSAT scores. So that's right there between those $70,000 and $50,000 average schools. So that is something to seriously consider if you're thinking of applying to law school with a score that is around or lower than the 50th percentile. You may not be able to have access to schools that can get you a decent starting salary. So there are some schools that when you look at their statistics, it looks like they've cracked the code and somehow they're admitting people with closer to median LSAT scores and they're still getting them high starting salaries. New York Law School, 6-figure median starting salary, 153 LSAT median. You got to dig into the numbers a little more than that, though, when you're researching law schools, because when you actually dig in, what you discover is that their bar passage rate on the first try is only 59%. And that is mostly the New York bar, which is not nearly as hard as the California bar, just a little coastal rivalry here. But in the employment rate 10 months after graduation, it's only 74%. So you have a better than 1 in 4 chance of going to New York Law School and not being employed 10 months after you graduate. And that is true of a lot of schools that seem like they're kind of beating the average, that they have high median starting salaries and low median LSAT scores. What's actually happening is that their top students, their best students, are getting employed at good firms. So they probably have a great alumni network. They're probably putting their best students into some good summer associate jobs while they're in law school. But the rest of the students who aren't at the top of the class, the people who actually came in with those LSAT scores around the median, because their top students are probably also going to have higher than median LSAT scores for the school, those students are struggling to pass the bar and they're struggling to find employment. And they may, in fact, not even be included in those salary numbers because, again, the salary numbers that are reported in ABA disclosures are for law firm jobs. The employment numbers, they break out between bar passage required and no bar passage required jobs, but salary numbers are for law firm jobs. So the people who are working at Nordstrom's may not be in the median salary calculation. So watch out for those outliers. If you find what you think is an outlier school and you're like, yeah, I'm going to apply there, check the rest of the numbers. I see, okay. Katie got the question of will we be sent the recording? You will be. So thank you, Katie, for grabbing that. All right, so how do you find a school that is going to get you money? So for the best possible chance, you're going to look for ABA disclosures that show a high median starting salary, but also high bar passage rates and a high rate of employment in jobs where bar passage is required. So an actual number beater school is UT Austin. They've got a 90% bar passage rate. They've got 85% 10-month employment. And they actually went, I didn't put this whole comparison in the slide deck because it's like kind of hard to see on a small slide, but they've actually got lower average student loan debt than New York law graduates do and a higher starting salary. That's for a 167 median LSAT score. So yes, you still have to be, that's still in the 90th percentiles. I think that's about, what is that, the 95th percentile? I'd have to look at the chart, but you're still needing a top LSAT score to get in there, but that is an example of a school that is potentially a really good deal because they graduate students with less debt and a higher bar passage rate and a higher starting salary, but you don't need like a 99th percentile 170 plus LSAT score to get in there. All right, so now let's talk about that other part of the equation. So salary only means something if you are not spending all of your salary on your student debt. Now, if you have a $200,000 a year job, you may be okay with spending a lot of your salary on your student debt for a while, because like maybe you can say live on 65 or 70,000 and then pay off your debt really quickly. That's a plan a lot of people have when they get out of law school. Hot tip on that, a lot of people who have that plan don't stick to the plan because of the pressure inside law firms to project a certain wealthy lifestyle so that the clients feel like you're rich and successful. So watch out for that if you do go big law. Don't cave to the pressure to buy a new luxury car or to like furnish your place in a certain way if you actually want to pay off your loans in time. And that seems, when you're not inside a law firm, that seems silly. Like, why would I buy a better car just because my coworkers have a better car? But law firms are a high social pressure environment, a lot of peer pressure. But if you want to pay off your loans without like having to make $200,000 a year, you might want to have less debt when you graduate. And that is a tricky calculus right now, because the thing that has happened in the law school economy is that law schools have gotten really good at marketing. So back 12 years ago, the 2008 recession happened. I was just turning 20 at the time. I was in my first job. My first startup collapsed. We made the mistake of IPOing in December of 2007. So this was a wild time. If you guys are current undergrads who are on the webinar right now, you may only remember it as like a thing that you dimly knew about that was in the news when you were 8, but it was a wild time, and it was a particularly wild time in law schools, because what happened was a whole bunch of people thought, oh, a recession, there's no jobs, I'm going to go hide out in law school. And then a bunch of people graduated from law school and it was still kind of a recession, and there weren't any jobs for them. And there were a whole bunch of articles in the media about law school is no longer a good bet. It's no longer a good way to get employment. And student enrollments in law school cratered and still really have not fully recovered to their pre-2008 levels. People just are not betting on law school as the best way to get a safe career anymore. So law schools could no longer count on just like being the thing that parents want their kids to do as a way to get students. They had to actually start marketing themselves. So what happened is tuition discounting, aka merit scholarships. So a lovely thing that happens in law school, which is actually terrible because it's completely non-transparent, is that everyone is paying a different price for law school. When you're in your 1L classes and you're in like either a giant Zoom or a auditorium, what year you're going to school, you can look around, look to your left, to your right, to the front, to the back, and you are probably not paying the same amount for tuition as any of those people, because merit scholarships, aka tuition discounts, are completely rampant, especially in slightly lower ranking law schools, mid-tier to like bottom third law schools, not so much in the top 14, but somewhat some of the top 14 do it, not all of them. But basically, people respond to discounts. So when you are not, if you're Harvard or Yale, you don't have to compete for the top law students, they compete for you. If you are not Harvard or Yale, you are competing with other law schools to attract top students, and therefore you need to do something to bring them in. And one of the things that is done to bring them in is discounting of tuition. They'll say, like, oh, we're going to give you a 60% scholarship. It's not really a scholarship, it's a tuition discount. So the law school rankings drive enrollment decisions, and law schools want to be higher in the rankings. So therefore, they want to have higher LSAT scoring admitted students and admitted students with a higher GPA. And they want to have students that are going to graduate from law school, pass the bar, and get good legal jobs, make good money. So that then, again, we talked about those ABA disclosures all law schools have to report that then affect how they rank in the US News and World Report rankings. They want their disclosures to be good. So in order to get the students that are going to make their disclosures look better, which is going to make their law school ranking go up, which is going to then attract more of the students who they don't have to give merit scholarships, tuition discounts to, who then are going to fill their coffers with lots of lovely full tuition dollars, then they offer the scholarships to people with high LSAT scores. So basically what's happening is people who do not get a high score on the LSAT are effectively, through their tuition, subsidizing the legal education of people who do get high scores on the LSAT. This is really a problem. We hope that it will be at some point addressed by law schools and addressed by the law school community, because that really is not fair. But right now, it is what it is. And if you are going to law school in the next few years, I do not foresee it changing anytime very soon. So you are going to need a high LSAT score to convince a school that you're going to boost their ranking, boost their bar passage rates and their ABA disclosures, and boost their employment statistics post-graduation, because otherwise you are going to be paying higher tuition effectively to subsidize the tuition of someone next to you who got a better LSAT score. So let's look at how dramatic this is. So these numbers are from a law school student engagement survey. They do it every year, but they focus on a different topic every year. So we don't have merit scholarship stats from more recent than 2015 to 2016, simply because this survey has been about other topics in the years since the 2015 to 2016 year. For instance, this year's law school student engagement survey was all about women in law and the unique stresses and experiences that women have in the legal field. But they did merit scholarships in 2015 to 2016. And we discovered, going through their survey responses, that people with a 166 to 180 LSAT score are 90% likely. 9 out of 10 of them are receiving merit scholarships. Now, this counts all merit scholarships. This is any merit scholarship. And sometimes schools hand out merit scholarships just like in a tiny amount, like $5,000 a year, just to make people not have to be the one person in their study group who has to say, oh yeah, I'm paying sticker price for tuition, because almost nobody's paying sticker price for tuition. So this doesn't mean like if you get a 166, you're guaranteed like a half or full scholarship. But you have a 9 out of 10 chance of getting some kind of merit scholarship if you have over a 166. And honestly, if you are looking at schools that give merit scholarships, it's probably better than 9 out of 10, because a lot of the people in this 166 to 180 are going to be applying to top law schools like Yale that don't give merit scholarships. And so therefore they're going to be in the 10%, but not because they couldn't have gotten merit scholarships, because they chose a school where they would not get merit scholarships. So realistically, if you're looking at schools that do give that money out, it's probably pretty much 100% chance that you're going to get some kind of merit scholarship if you're in that 166 to 180. Now, it drops slowly at first, 161 to 165, you still have a pretty good chance. 156 to 160, and this is where you start to realize it's not really scholarships, it's tuition discounting, because remember, when we went back to the salary slides, those 156 to 160 scorers were not necessarily going to schools that land them $200,000 a year jobs. They were going to schools that maybe land them $75,000 a year jobs. So 3/4 of them still getting merit scholarships does not necessarily mean that these are top students who show incredible academic merit. It means that they're going to law schools that have a lower than 156 to 160 median LSAT score in their ABA disclosures right now and would like to raise it, or schools that are just using tuition discounts as marketing to get you to go there and are still making a pretty handsome profit even off the discounted tuition. Just the fact that you got a scholarship does not mean that law school is being provided to you at a loss. Law school is a profit center for most universities. In fact, law schools that are not standalones, that are part of a larger university system, so for instance, like UCLA Law, which is up the road from me, I'm pointing to it even though you can't see out my window on Zoom. UCLA Law is a profit center for the UCLA system. It effectively subsidizes them providing other programs like arts and humanities programs that they lose money on. That is because people pay a lot of tuition, and then they also go out and get jobs that allow them to make generous alumni donations. So no law school is going to operate at a loss, and no law school can afford to give 75% of its students scholarships that are really giving out education for less than the cost of providing it. It just means they're reducing their profits slightly from what they would make if you were paying sticker. Now, when you get down to the very bottom here, 140 and below, which realistically, most law schools are not going to accept an LSAT score that low unless you have some other incredible accomplishment like, I don't know, publishing a New York Times best-selling book that was selected for the Oprah Book Club. Then you could maybe get into law school because you're an outstandingly accomplished person in other ways. But for the most part, accredited law schools are not taking LSAT scores in the 130s. If you do happen to get into law school with one of those scores, your chance of receiving a merit scholarship is quite low, only 16%. So, how does that affect you? Well, it dramatically affects your debt at graduation. So if you're expecting to graduate with over $200,000 in debt, there's only a 1 in 3 chance that you had a merit scholarship. While if you are expecting to graduate with $1 to $40,000 in debt, you had a 3/4 chance of receiving merit scholarships. Now, another reason why this system sucks, and I hate that it is what I have to tell you about, but that is what it is. That is where we're at right now, is that when you study those merit scholarships, they're actually kind of going disproportionately to people who are already in a better position than others to afford law school. Because doing well on the LSAT, it takes time, and you also kind of have to spend money on prep. And like, say, a single mom who's a recent immigrant and working in a working class job doesn't have a lot of time and money to prepare for the LSAT. So obviously what's really happening is this is kind of a regressive tax on law students. This is like the people who have the least ability to invest in getting a higher LSAT score are paying the highest tuition in order to subsidize the tuition for people who already had the privilege of spending a lot of time and money getting ready for the LSAT. Again, system sucks. Hopefully they change it, but if you are trying to go to law school in the very near future, this is the system that you have to deal with. Consider protesting it in some way once you're on campus and part of a student group. All right, so now we have a comparison, and I'm actually going to switch to a larger version of this. So I actually ran a hypothetical with 2 made-up students. These are not real people, but I just wanted to see the difference between a mid-90th percentile LSAT score and a just slightly over the median LSAT score in terms of what the student's financial futures would be. So in order to show the impact of these merit scholarships as well as postgraduate salaries, I decided that we have a high score Hallie versus no preparation Nelson. And they both took the LSAT. Hallie got a 169, Nelson got a 155. Then I chose for them 2 schools where they are around the median for admitted students on their LSAT score, and where both of these schools are known for being generous with scholarships. So I pulled them both off of the list of law schools that are most generous with merit scholarships. Generous, again, it's a bad system. Most reliant on tuition discounting might be a better way to refer to them. But these are both on the list of schools that give a lot of students at least a 50% scholarship. So Hallie's going to go to University of Washington, St. Louis. Nelson is going to go to UN Lincoln. So they're going to the 17th and 76th ranked law schools. So both still at top 100 law schools. Neither of them's going to like a really terrible law school. And they're actually kind of paying similar tuition. So they're going to, I ran the average scholarships. And I gave them both basically the average scholarships for the university. So their net tuition, not their gross tuition, their tuition after the average scholarships at their respective schools was not that different, only $8,000 difference. Bar passage chances, also not that different, about a 2% difference. Employment starts to be a little bit more of a difference. But then the starting salary is where they really get you. So Washington, St. Louis has $162,000 starting salary. Remember, that's not really a real salary. That just means a higher proportion of people are getting those $170,000 to $220,000 a year starting jobs. And then certain people are probably staying local around St. Louis and getting like $75,000 a year jobs. But Hallie has a good chance of going to a big law firm. Nelson, he's going to get his school's median starting salary too, which is $60,000. So he probably had to stay around Lincoln, get a job in that area because most lower ranking law schools are not national employment outcomes. They are more able to help you get a first job locally. And then if you're a star at that first job, you can look at national employers, you can look at moving. But if you're at a lower ranking law school, probably your first job is going to be around the area of your law school. Now, I looked at cost of living as well. And after factoring in the local cost of living in both of these areas, Hallie is actually going to have a little more debt when she graduates. She went to school in a more expensive area, and I decided that she used debt at the average interest rate for student loans right now to finance her cost of living. And Nelson, he got his scholarship was more able to subsidize his cost of living because it was cheaper. And so he's only $62,000 in debt. So Hallie's got more debt. But after paying it off, she actually has each year still $150,000 to live on if she's going to pay off her student loans in 10 years. If Nelson's going to pay off his student loans in 10 years, he's actually going to only have $52,000 a year to live on. And his total debt cost is 130% of his salary. So like when you think about, when people talk about you should only buy a house that's like 3 years or less of your annual gross salary, that's a factor for debt too. So you really don't want to have debt that is more than 100% of your annual salary because you know it's going to take you forever to pay off. Whereas Hallie's actually only got debt that costs 75% of her annual salary. And even after paying it off each year, if she's making no extra payments, just paying her 4.66% interest, she's still got $150,000 to live on. So that is the difference of a high LSAT score. And I ran this comparison with that being the only difference, no GPA difference, nothing else between these two hypothetical people who don't really exist, but who are very similar to how a lot of people's outcomes after law school are. If you look on like forums where people talk about their law school experiences and their first year law salaries. So if you want to do well on the LSAT, you have to prepare. I have a slide here of LSATMax's pricing and the opportunities and features that we offer with that. So you can, I'm not gonna like read you a big, huge sales pitch and read you all of the features. You can see them on the slide. I'll just tell you like why I think LSATMax is a good idea, which is right now, everybody's doing remote learning. So there are a lot of companies that are actually really good at offering classroom courses that are now trying to do online courses because that's all they can do. LSATMax has been an online only remote learning company for more than a decade. So it is actually a company that is good at building technology. It is a company with a solid engineering team. It is a company that had a solid engineering team before COVID-19. So the app works. The app is properly designed with a curriculum that is intended for self-paced online instruction, not intended for the classroom. The tutors are used to tutoring remotely, not just figuring it out and hating it and counting the time until they can go back to the classroom. The other reason that I like LSATMax is that we have the flexibility to do the right thing for students because we're basically a family company. We're not owned by venture capitalists. Nobody has outside investors. There's no hedge fund that has somebody on the board. We're just owned by a dude named Moran that you will probably at some point talk to if you're a student, because he kind of incorrigibly does some of the student support himself, even though he's the CEO and he should be paying attention to CEO responsibilities, but he thinks it's fun. Just a nice dude who went to Harvard Law, who started a test prep company. And so we get to do things like give a scholarship for our test prep to people who receive a fee waiver from LSAC. So if you are someone who has applied for an exemption from the $200 price tag on taking the LSAT and has received that exemption called a fee waiver in your email it to us and we'll give you a scholarship to our course, because we're not trying to take money from people who have no money. We're trying to provide a valuable service to people who can afford to pay for it and use that to subsidize giving our course away for free to people who can't. And also, we have the coolest instructors, but that might just be a personal assessment. That part might be my opinion, but I think we have the coolest instructors. And unlike certain competitors I won't name, we've never gotten caught administering tests in our own office and then calling people 99th percentile scorers after they get to a 99th percentile score on a test administered in a test company's office rather than an actual official LSAT. So we all had to submit score reports. We all really have 99th percentile scores. And also, we really try not to hire people who just got their high scores by being naturally talented at the LSAT. We try to hire people who had to work for it and who had a big increase from their diagnostic so that they actually know what students are going through. All right, so that's my sales pitch. Hopefully I'll see some of you guys as students. I will take your questions now. Okay, so someone asked, is there a limit of how many times you should take the test? Well, there is a limit of how many times you can, but up to the LSAC's determined limit of how many times you can take the test, which they just changed to 3 times in a single testing year, 5 times within 5 years, or I think 7 times lifetime. Up to that limit, it does not really matter. They're not going to judge you unless you are taking it over and over and your score is going down. If you are taking it and your score is going up, there are lots of people who get into top law schools with a 4th or 5th retake where they finally got that 175 that they were looking for. So for the most part, because it benefits them, because the score they admit you based on is the score that they are reporting for their ABA disclosures, and that raises their median LSAT score, it benefits schools to only look at your highest LSAT score, so that is what they do. Is your LSAT score only a factor in the admissions process, or is it something future employers will look at? They may look at it depending on the employer. They may ask you for it. They may ask you to submit your score report to verify that you have the score that you say that you have. But it is not as big a factor as where you went to school. So your employers, if they know that you went to, say, Columbia Law School or Berkeley, they are going to know that you must have had a good LSAT score, because they know that those schools don't admit people with low LSAT scores for the most part. If you went to a little lower ranking school, they may ask to look at your LSAT score or ask you in an interview what it is, but it's not like they base your salary directly on it. The reason that salary is statistically tied to LSAT score is based on the schools it gets you into, not based on law firms looking at your LSAT score, though they may ask to see it. But probably chances are, because LSAT score didn't used to be so linked to legal employment and legal salary, there's actually a pretty good chance that if you go to a big law firm and your boss is over 50 years old when you start, you might be working for someone with a lower LSAT score than you, because it used to be much more possible to get into big law firms from lower ranking schools. Are there significant differences of median salaries among the top 14? Christopher, no, not at the median. Median private sector salary is $180,000 for all of the top 14. The percentage of students that go to the private sector does differ a little bit between them, but if you are going top 14, basically, if you do well in your class and you do well on your on-campus interviews, you have a very strong chance of getting a big law offer. Shatika wants to know about tutoring. I do sometimes tutor. Right now, I am fully booked for the foreseeable future because most of my time is spent on curriculum. So I'm writing our logic games book, for instance, right now. But I have really, really wonderful colleagues. If you guys listen to the podcast, my co-host Brandon, he gets booked up pretty quickly too, because people know him from the podcast, and also like he gets a lot of word of mouth, but he sometimes has availability. So I'll put a link to the podcast in the chat for any of you who have not heard it yet. Ravi is great. Ravi also gets booked up pretty quickly because he's 180 and people like to tutor with the 180, but he's also just a really nice guy. Andrea is great. We also just onboarded a bunch of new tutors who are awesome and who come with great credentials. So there's also now, and I don't know why we don't promote this more because I think it's freaking great. There's now a tutoring with friends option where if you can get up to 3 of your friends together to oh, my screen share went away. Okay, well then I will just be speaker mode now, I guess. If you get 3 friends together who also want to take LSAT tutoring, you can actually share your hours with them. So you can do the tutoring with friends, and depending on the okay, someone is asking about pricing, so I have to pull this back up. Maybe Katie can put pricing information for tutoring in the chat because I don't seem to have it in my document. But yeah, you can, I believe with the bigger packages, if you get 3 friends to do tutoring with friends with you, I believe you can actually get the price as low as $33 an hour for each of you. So yeah, that is a really good deal. And I don't think any other company has that kind of deal. So try to get, if you're going to tutor, like if money is an issue for you, which like who isn't, it's 2020, there's a coronavirus. Try to get some friends who are going to tutor too and do group tutoring hours because you can really get the price down that way. Maybe Katie can, Katie posted more in the chat about that. Thank you, Katie. Okay, let's see. FW asks, do salaries have to do with field of law? More with the size of the law firm. So with the size of the law firm, like if you have over 500 lawyers, you are talking about a big corporate. They're sometimes called white shoe. The white shoe law firms have big corporate clients. Now, environmental law, you will see good salary statistics there. It is misleading if you want to be on the side of the environment. If you are fine with being on the side of polluters, then you can make a lot of money in environmental law by representing corporations who are suing to be exempted from environmental laws. If you are working in the defense of the environment, like for the Sierra Club, you are likely to be making a nonprofit salary. So you're likely to be making $35,000 to $65,000. So there are some fields where you have to kind of watch out for the salary numbers because they are not quite what they look like. But yes, for the most part, the highest salaries are at the giant corporate white shoe firms. Below there, yes, the field you're practicing in makes a difference, but not so much in your first year of employment, because your first year of employment is the one where there really is kind of, most law firms just have one salary that they pay to all first years. It doesn't matter who you are, you just get the first year salary. And after that, your personal merit as a lawyer and your success will affect it. And then at a certain point, you actually start doing profit sharing, which brings me to FW's second question, paths of partners who didn't graduate from T14. You're not likely to be a partner at a white shoe top corporate law firm if you didn't graduate from top 14, because you are not likely to get employed there unless you are like a superstar litigator and they pull you from a smaller law firm because they have seen your performance and they love you. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to be a partner at any law firm. Smaller law firms, kind of same timeline, they probably want to see 6 or 7 years of your work before they put you on the partner track, although very small, like family-owned law firms may talk to you about being a partner earlier. Now remember, you want it to take a while because you want to have saved up money, because when you're asked to become a partner, you actually have to pay for that. You're actually buying equity in the law firm, and in exchange you get ownership and a share of the profits. So you don't actually want to be asked to be a partner when you've been a lawyer for 2 years, because you can't afford it. You won't have the savings to buy into partnership. So really, no matter the size of the law firm, 6 to 7 years is the earliest that it's really realistic to start becoming a partner. And that's not even like becoming a partner, that's like starting the process. Does applying after January mean you will receive less scholarships? Yes. Scholarship funds are typically close to exhausted by that point, because they give them out and they have promised scholarships to students when they admitted them, so they are not going to have it left in their budget. How far in advance should you take a course before taking the test? At least 4 months. I recommend saving 4 to 6 months, and I also recommend planning for at least one retake, because there's just a lot of ways for your first LSAT to go wrong. You can have just a really bad night of sleep and get a score that is lower than you're capable of. So make your timeline so that there is a reasonable possibility of a retake that will not throw off your timeline for applying. Chris has a couple more questions. Can I re-explain the downfalls of merit-based scholarships when it comes to those who are already privileged? They disproportionately flow to those who already have a lot of free time and disposable income, because they can prepare for the LSAT more. When you look at the statistics, it's basically all of the groups that we already know have a little extra privilege in our society that get a disproportionate number of law school merit scholarships. Now, there are also scholarships based on financial need. I didn't talk about those because those aren't related to your LSAT score. Those are solely based on financial need. They're based on your FAFSA. Schools like Harvard only give those kind of scholarships out. But schools that do give merit scholarships, when you look at the stats, they are tending to give them a little bit more to people who are white, people who are male, people who do not have a disability, people who are heterosexual, not because they are trying to disproportionately give those scholarships to already privileged groups, but just because those are the groups that have a lot of time and money to spend getting ready for the LSAT, and therefore are a little likelier to have the super high LSAT score. And then law professors, no, I don't know the median or mean LSAT scores of law professors, but there are a relatively small number of schools that produce a significant number of law professors. So it's not like firmly top 14 the way white shoe law employment is, but it is more like top 25 or 30, and the top 14 produce more. Law professor is a great job. It is probably, if I actually were to go to law school, which I haven't done yet because I'm having way too much fun teaching the test, but if I were to go to law school, that is probably the track that I would try to place myself on, because that sounds like a lot more fun than anything else that I could be doing in law. Is a great job. You get to teach, you get to do original legal research, you get to be on a cool college campus all the time. So it's very competitive. So there are not very many schools that produce a lot of law professors, and they all tend to be in the upper tier of schools. So you're still going to need a good LSAT score to take that path, and also get on law review and start publishing as soon as possible, because you're going to need a lot of publications to enter the academic job market. Why do most, if not all, law firms choose to stay private? Because they are partner owned. The partners do not want to go share their ownership with a bunch of stockholders. I don't know, financial regulatory wise, if there is actually anything that would prevent a law firm from choosing to convert from a private partnership into a publicly owned company. That is not my area of expertise. That is an interesting question, though, and it would probably be interesting to research. But I would guess that even if regulatorily that's possible, they will not do that, because the partners make a lot more money if the partners own the law firm than if they were to go public. Scholarships after January, is this across all schools or top 14? Across all schools, yeah, actually probably more so outside of the top 14, because outside of the top 14, they give more merit scholarships. Now, financial needs scholarships might be a little less so. There might be a little bit more money left in the financial needs scholarship pot, but probably not much. For the most part, you are not going to get as much scholarship money applying late because they just don't have it in the budget. Eunice, you'll get an email from Katie. So any questions that you have for someone privately, just reply to Katie's email. And she also she has me on Slack. We talk all day on Slack. So if it's something that I need to answer, she can just ping me to answer you. So just reply to when Katie's email comes to you with the discount code, anything that you want to talk about privately, just reply to that and we'll get it. All right. I was about to say I got through all of the questions, but there's one more, so I'll take this one more. Ooh, this is probably a Katie question though. So Katie, someone's asking, do they have to start using their package right away, or can they activate it after the holidays if they purchase it within the next 24 hours to use a discount code? That I don't know right now, so maybe Katie can help us with that. Yes, she is typing an answer to you, so you will get an answer on that. For everybody else, well, thank you guys for spending a little bit of your Wednesday with me. This was really fun. I'm sorry to have to be the bearer of the news that the LSAT determines your financial future to such a degree, but better to know it than not know it and go into law school not realizing that. So I hope this has been helpful, even if admittedly a little bit disappointing. Okay, so if you also have the same question about the activating the package later, just email Katie and she will help you figure that out. And then, yes, you are most welcome. Thank you all for joining, and I hope to see some of you guys around. Katie just posted her email in the chat for anybody who needs it. Hope to see some of you guys around for future webinars and as LSATMax students. Oh, and Brianna, financially, it doesn't make so much of a difference at schools that don't give merit scholarships, but it makes a pretty big difference to your chances of admissions later that you apply, especially this year. If you're thinking of applying this year, please apply ASAP. Applications are way up. It's going to be an incredibly competitive year at the top schools, maybe the most competitive year ever at the top schools, literally. We have an episode about it on the podcast. I'll post the podcast link again. So if anybody is trying to apply this year, please take your Thanksgiving time off to finish your application and get it in, because this is going to be an incredibly busy year. All right, that is all from me today. Have a great rest of your Wednesday, and sprinkling high LSAT score dust on all of you through my webcam. Bye.